Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Fireside Chat. This is the second Fireside Chat of 2022. And for today, the topic that we end up choosing was pressure, dealing with pressure, right? So I believe that all of us as software people, we've been in loads of different software projects, working for many different types of companies of all shapes and forms and sizes, and with different types of people. And I believe that all of us experience some some sort of pressure, let's say, or working under pressure. And I think this is a good topic for us to discuss. But I believe that there are multiple types of pressures, and the ways that we cope with them might differ. So why don't we start there, maybe? So I don't know, guys. Like, what are the different types of pressures that you can think of? And so, can we describe them a little bit? Why do they exist? And also, like, how do you deal with them? Yeah, let's start from there.
Before we even talk about different types of pressure, I think it'll be nice to define pressure as well.
Cool.
Uh,
Okay.
the way that I mean, I have no kind of literary kind of understanding of what that means from a psychological perspective, but I can describe it how I feel pressure, and that is that when there is a mismatch between my ability to achieve certain things and the expectations both that I have and other people may have around achieving them, right? So there's that mismatch where you start feeling pressure when you start fearing that you will not achieve the things that you're expecting yourselves to achieve or others are expecting you to achieve.
Yeah, yeah, and also I would say that this is something that is super common, no? Like you, a lot of the time you don't really have a lot of say, no, in other people's. You can maybe change your own expectations, as this is probably a source or a type of pressure, no, that the self-imposed one, no, it's like I want to do better, or I set certain expectations about how I should respond in certain situations, no? But the external ones, no, or the expectations that other people may have, is something that you can't influence a lot, right? And because they're going to be there, like dealing specifically with those, I think is quite important. And you get this all the time. Like if you have a client, they are going to have expectations around when is something going to be delivered, no, or they may have an idea of what the product needs to look like, or all of these things is quite easy for them to turn into pressure, no? When you're working in a project.
Yep.
So you mentioned a few different pressures. Like Mesh, I like your perspective. Like it's a more philosophical perspective in terms of like, well, more. I liked how you defined, like for example, is when you feel under pressure. It's not that exactly the type of pressure, but it's like is when you feel that you are not able to achieve, from what I understood, what is potentially extra. So there is an expectation or some other constraints, and you feel that given your skills and the amount of time that you might have, you might not meet those expectations. And that's when you consider that you are under pressure. Is that correct? That's where you came. Is that
Yeah,
correct,
yeah,
my
exactly.
understanding?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, is pressure is always internal. It's what you feel, right? All these other internal and external things contribute. Like for example, Jose said, you might have other people expecting things of you, and you may not be able to change that, right? The same expectation, two people in the same team may feel it differently. It's to do with how you translate expectations of other and the environment around you into the expectations onto yourself, because at the end of the day what really matters is what you expect of yourself, right? There are many sources of that expectations, but it's what you expect of yourself that then adds to that pressure. Added to that is certain fears as well, right? Is the consequences of not being able to achieve, right? What kind of consequences you subject yourself. At that point there might be more objective consequences as well, like for example you can lose your job, that could be considered a bit more objective consequence on the pressure. But it's those fears that add to this as well.
Like I would like to go back to because like you brought a perspective match that I didn't consider much, because normally when you talk about pressure you always like see that from the external perspective, like the thing that is putting pressure on you. But for example, you gave a very interesting point, because this is certainly true. Like I experienced that myself multiple times, where being part of a team, some people might feel under pressure while others don't, right? So and the external factors are exactly the same. But Jose also mentioned, like as in his opening statement, like all the different types of pressure as well. So he mentioned quite a few. He mentioned even self-imposed pressure, that is not something that quite often people talk about, but mentioned deadlines. We mentioned like clients from a pressure from a client. So there is a lot for us to talk here. So why don't we pick, like, let's say one type of situation. Let's say like a common situation is we are in a project, we are all developers in that, or any software professional in that project. And maybe we could start from, I don't know, there are some deadlines from someone. So this is one type of pressure. So how can we cope with that? Or even how can we define what are the different types of deadlines in there that we need to deal with?
It actually, like the way I see it is this is quite a common thing, right? There's a bunch of stakeholders, they're imposing a deadline, and because we're talking about pressure here, is that at least some people in the team or yourself don't think that they're achievable, right? Now you're thinking, am I going to have to work overtime? Am I going to have to really burn the kind of midnight oil to get that sorted, right? But I think before we just the way I would handle this kind of thing, and I have in the past, is that always think from the perspective of, okay, there are who is where is this pressure coming from, and and why are we facing that? In some cases, if let's say that the pressure is coming from stakeholders, let's say your bosses, delivery managers, whoever is outside the team is bringing this pressure in, or even a delivery manager inside the team is bringing this pressure in, right? Let's just take that example. And they're saying that we must have these features done by this particular time, and the whole team is or at the very least you think that it's not possible. Now, first of all, if the whole team, one thing is to understand, well, is it just you who thinks it's not possible? Is it the whole team? So you are a team, and I think first thing is to align yourself with the team. Either the first thing is to kind of really communicate that, like, listen, I don't think this is possible, and these are the reasons that I don't think this is possible. And then hear from the team, keep an open mind, and see if the team thinks the same. The simplest way is that the team thinks the same as you, right? And then you can present a single front to the stakeholder. Now the stakeholder may be imposing a deadline because they themselves are under certain pressures. They themselves might think that this is not possible. Well, in that case, why actually lying or to yourself or to the delivery the stakeholder is not the best thing, right? It's because you may, if the whole team is saying this is not achievable, you've got a pretty powerful position to deal with your stakeholder. And then the stakeholder may be doing this because they don't fully understand or they think that putting pressure on you might give them a bit extra, you might achieve a bit more, and their, let's say, failure to deliver might be less acute, right? So then you can start talking to the stakeholder on, like, what is achievable, what's not achievable, and helping them understand why, and so that you can then kind of bring them to yourself. And then if the pressure to them is coming from elsewhere, help them relieve that pressure, so you kind of keep going upwards. So it's all about communication, visibility, trying to establish trust, but also trying to establish the reasons behind why certain things are not achievable. So you're trying to deal with that situation. That's taking the point of view that everybody is they're either ill-informed, they all want to do the right thing, but they're ill-informed, or they or they're lacking certain information. If that's the point of view, then this will help. But in certain cases, it's just about politics, right? It's about us and them, and certain stakeholders don't just see you as and as they have their own objectives, and they don't care, and this will happen as well. But in that case, if your team is aligned, you are again in a strong position to hold your position, right? You've gone the first way and try to make it visible, try to make them understand everything. And if they still don't understand, then you can take a position as well, that as long as it's well informed position and reasoned, and it's communicated well, and it is not taking a negative perspective. It's not like, oh no, we can't do it, but rather, this cannot happen because of these reasons. This is all the things we are trying to make it happen faster or better, and we've done all in our power to be able to do it, but there is a kind of there's laws of physics that are preventing this, right? And then you do take a position.
One thing that I would say is that it requires that the scenario that you described requires two main things. One is empathy, like that ability to not only know what's happening to you and understand it, but also what is happening to the other person. Why are they requesting this, and so on, right? Like, what is it their situation, and being able to put yourself in their shoes and have that conversation from a point of view of not antagonizing, but problem solving, which would be the second part, no? Because if you think it may not be possible, there are still things that you can do, either to minimize the risk or to make sure that the things that are possible are the most important ones. And this is, again, going back to Agile and the way that we work, no? It's about that value. What is it that has value? Does everything have to be there by that deadline? Or are the things that are more important? And then you can start problem solving together once you understand where everyone is coming from, right? And that's a much healthier conversation than just saying no. Because Matt, it sounds a bit like you can stand your ground. Sounds a bit like, no, we're not gonna do it. And I know this is not what you were saying, right? But someone could say, oh, this is what I've been trying to do. Like, they're crazy. Like, how is it possible that someone set a date for this? No, and right, and sometimes those dates or those are there for a reason. We just don't know why that is, right? And that curiosity and that ability to hey, let's solve this together, because everyone knows, as you were saying, everyone's coming to this wanting to do the best they can, no, and wanting for things to go well, right? So that's a good
I think the standing the ground is in a very particular scenario where there is as I said, a lot of things have been done, but there is an environment where there is an us and them, and you've done everything in order to alleviate that. And this is basically in more dysfunctional organizations, where there are political gains and people are incentivized in ways, where they are, they put pressure on, otherwise, they don't get into a certain club.
Or they have some interest in things going wrong as well. So some people may actually be working against.
Well, yeah, they benefit from, like, look, I've done everything. I'm kind of putting the pressure on. I'm cracking the whip, and see, they still failed. And they don't. It doesn't matter whether the team is passes or is successful or failed. Actually, what matters is that they're seen to have put the pressure on. They've seen to have cracked the whip, and those kind of environments do exist. And sometimes certain kind of people, they just cannot be reasoned with, right? And I think that's a very kind of a specific scenario where you do have to stand your ground. But of course, that's not where you start. You start with working and problem solving together.
Exactly, and I think that, like, in the previous episode, we even touched upon a little bit on this, and I believe, like, again, this is anecdotal evidence, and maybe a side effect of the kind of I don't like to choose the word bubble, but like the kind of circles that we interact. So who we are as a company and the whole focus on software craftsmanship and embracing agile. Our clients, they tend to share a lot of those values as well. So we don't encounter those extreme cases as often as we used to encounter in the early days of our career. So, for example, those organizations where there's no collaboration, that people just come top down and stuff, although we acknowledge that they exist, but at least I like to think, at least given our experience, they are far fewer today than they were in the past. And sometimes every time that we talk about pressure, we end up talking about those very dysfunction top down as if they were the majority. I like to think that they are not anymore. But just to put a stone on that one, if we are in that organization, I can only see two cases. And now remember, we are, as you said, Mesh, you don't start there, but we are assuming that now we are working with really old school organizations. There are a few things that you can do. One, just leave, right? Before that you do that, so if the other person is being really unreasonable and stuff, there are a few things that you can try just before you leave, in my view. One is the power of documenting things. It's amazing how you can shift responsibility just putting that external pressure back into an email and say, look, I know that you're pushing us hard to do that. We already gave you all the explanations in the world why this might not be possible, all the risks and stuff. But quite often those conversations happen in meetings, but never formally. You don't have anything written down formally. And the very few situations where I had to deal with that in a more like, I was still not at the point that I was ready to resign yet, but I was really, and normally this is coming from one person, right? It's not like, sometimes you have one person that is difficult, but everyone else is still more reasonable. And then there is a power to say, look, I give you all the information. So what I will do, I will put that down in an email, and I'm going to copy you and everyone else involved, including maybe your boss or something like that. So like, this is what we are saying. If we want to go ahead, we're going to go ahead. But those are the risks. This is what we are saying. As soon as you want to document, because what you are doing when you do that, you are now shifting the responsibility. Because if you just take the pressure, nothing is documented, you failed if you don't achieve. But as soon as you say, like, this is the agreement that you are doing, and those are the information that we are providing even before we start, now you're making the person that is putting the pressure part of that decision and also responsible for its success and failure. Because now it's all documented, all the risks are in there, and the person still gave the go-ahead. See what I'm saying? So there is a lot of power in expanding that conversation to more people and documenting those.
Communication, basically. Make it visible and don't take it on to yourself if you've been forced to make certain decisions. Yeah.
You will see that and you don't need to be very forced. So like, okay, so as we're discussing here, so what I will do, and you notify the person, say, look, okay, what I will do, I'll put that on an email and I'm going to copy everyone. As soon as you start going that direction, you already feel the conversation changing a bit. If the person on the other side they are being a bit, I don't know what the adjective would be, but like, so this is one way. But again, like, if you are always working in that way, if everything you need to do, you need to go to this length, you should reconsider. But again, those are, I would like to park that, because normally those are
that's an exception, not the rule. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that is not helpful. So maybe we should talk more about things that are, assuming that people are all trying to do a good job, we have a better relationship that is more of the norm in companies embracing agile today. But we still have deadlines. We still have like the features that we need to deliver by. We still have clients waiting for things. We have external deadlines. So what would be a better way? So it's because you still need to commit to something, right? So most of the time.
Well, I think we already touched a little bit on this, right? Like when we talked about empathy, problem solving, the problem solving part, it depends on the tools that you have, no, and what context you're working in. It's what we discussed. Can we, reduce the scope? Can we, increase the team? That, like, there are plenty of things that maybe you can try, or can we de-risk this thing by building a walking skeleton and then adding the features, so that way we can know sooner that we have an issue and not finding at the end. Like, all of those things are kind of building trust, like the the objective of reviews and how people call it demos and so on is also to build that trust, and for stakeholders to see the progress with their own eyes, and they can provide input and so on. So building those relationships and having that clear communication, transparency, not hiding things under the rug, but facing them. If you know that they're, face them and try to solve them. No, I think that's the way to go,
Right.
at least in the context that we're discussing now. No,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing I think out of all those things, I would say is that the fast feedback loop, which is the principle behind Agile, is one of the most important things I've experienced in throughout my career as one of the great pressure relievers. Right. It's in fact, I've seen where when I first started working as a software developer, there wasn't even an idea of team as that often. They used to give work to different people. Everyone got this thing to do, and there wasn't really an idea of a team working
It was
on.
managed by per person.
Yeah, exactly. And what often happened is that you'd kind of go away into your corner, sometimes for months, and you'd have like a large thing to finish, and in the end you would get you'd be working day and night towards the end for that, right? And I remember it being such a big source even for myself, source of pressure, because it's almost like open heart surgery, and you have so much inventory built up, and because you're not really taking the feedback as well, the pressure is building on what kind of success this thing that you're doing would have. And it gets worse and worse because the amount of investment is building on a daily basis, right? And then you may have taken a wrong turn somewhere, and you have just realized that you've taken a wrong turn, but that wrong turn was a month ago, and there was no one to kind of inform you, and now you're
you're
trying to kind of
committed.
claw.
Now
uh,
you need to sunken cost fallacy. Like, I already
exactly.
went down this way. We need to go all the way.
Or even worse, you've backtracked, but you can't now say to your stakeholder, like, listen, I've just wasted the last month and I'm gonna have to start again. Because this was quite a common occurrence, I know you, and it used to cause a lot. So like working in an iterative fashion and working as a team on a daily basis, where you are making transparent your work and also understanding others, and demo, as you said, demoing to the client or whoever your stakeholders are, getting the feedback and moving accordingly. All these things actually a terrific way to relieve the pressure of yourself and work in a much more collaborative manner, basically.
I never thought about the short feedback loop as a stress reliever or pressure reliever, as you mentioned, which is very, very true. And I really like how you're. I never thought about this way, but I can certainly relate to that, because sometimes you just take it for granted. Because like if I look back for the past, like, I don't know, 10 or even more years, like since we started working on more agile fashion, as you said, like 15 years ago, probably when we really started working that way. No doubt. If I compare to my life before Agile, I was far more stressed before. And it's not interesting what you were saying, because you are constantly adapting and just say, okay, what can we do next? What can we do next? And constantly reshaping. There are a few things that what I take from this, for example, and this is dealing with the pressure. Like, I like how you said, Mesh, that is something that you feel. Of course, that there is the external factors, but some people might feel more pressure than others, even with exactly the same external factors. So, which goes back to, like, which puts back the responsibility on you to relieve that pressure. Because the worst thing that you can do is just to take it. Oh, I'm feeling under pressure now, I just need to deal with that, like, on my own and stuff. So the only way that you can do that is if you do something about it, because as we discussed, your colleagues might not be feeling the same way, but you are. So you will need to take that initiative and say, look, I need to talk about this, and get some help and from my colleagues, or change the way we work and stuff. And quite a few of them this is much easier when you also build a good relationship with people, right? So, but again, the responsibility is on you to make sure that you can have those conversations and making other people comfortable and understanding. I think that a lot of people feel under pressure, but they are not curious enough to understand why. It's not only the empathy side, as Jose mentioned and stuff, it's really having the curiosity of going a few levels up and say, like, where is this coming from? Right? So we have an example in one of our clients where it's a very large client, and the CEO, all of a sudden, that is not very involved with the teams, all of a sudden came in blazing and say, hey, we have this deadline and we need to do that. And we had to reshape our teams and refocus and stuff. And we were all, where is this coming from? Fortunately, we have a good relationship with people, but we also were curious. So then we start digging and digging and digging. And one thing that we need to get done, for example, by April, is because there is a regulatory deadline for December, end of December. So then we were aware of that deadline, but why we are working against March to April deadline? This was not clear to us. But then we start developing that curiosity, because then, for example, in this large organization that I'm talking about, they have more than 10,000 clients using their products. And the regulation says that all of their clients need to have the new version of the product that is compliant with that regulation by the end of the year. So then we say, like, okay, again, why is till March and April? Because it takes them about 6 months to roll out the new version of the software across all the 10,000 or more clients that they have, because there is installation, there are software on-premise, there are other ones that need to migrate and stuff. And before they start rolling out, they need to do all the due diligence, because a regulatory software, you cannot have a bug in there, or certain bugs might cause a serious damage. So it's not just automated tests that goes into that. There are far more things that are laws of integration. So as we start walking backwards, then we start seeing why we are talking about March. But we had to have a lot of curiosity to understand the entire life cycle of the software, all the way down to the details of the regulation of what needs to be delivered, for us to understand why we had to be ready development-wise by April. But then there is another level of curiosity. So then we understood the deadline. But then what we're still not clear is, what is the scope that we need to achieve by that deadline? And then we also need to understand more about those regulations, more about what's really necessary, because then we need to calibrate scope in it. And we need to become very creative. If our team is not capable of doing, what are the alternatives that you're going to do? Because we need to get more people involved. So it's not only just say, hey, it's not going to be possible, as you were saying, Mash, or only having empathy. It's like, okay, there is pressure in here, but I will need to do far more to alleviate and really help the organization. But I'll need to really think out of the box and understand the entire process and act in multiple fronts. In this example,
it's almost it's actually a responsible attitude to take, when someone comes with some external pressure, to understand the sources behind it. And in fact, I would flip that actually not acknowledging those things and internalizing the forces of those pressures could actually be quite unprofessional. And the example I would give is the kind of team member, and I've definitely had those where you are expecting some things to be done, and they'll say, yeah, it'll be done. And then on the day that it's meant to be done, it's like, no, it's not done. And so that is actually, people are not doing it because they have a they mean bad. Actually, they mean well. What they're trying to do is they're internalizing those pressures to say, okay, I'm experiencing that pressure and somehow thinking that it's their fault, and I'm gonna fix my fault. I'm gonna work all night tonight and I'm gonna get this sorted, and not really making that visible to the rest of the team and making it a team problem so they can help. But at the time that they make that visible is when there is no time to help. right? And
That's
and this can, to me, is unprofessional.
and people think that they're doing the right thing, right? Like I always
Yeah.
like you can ask some of the people, like if I see them, staying late or whatever, like I would ask them, hey, what's happening? Because sometimes people say, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do more, but what they're actually doing is they're hiding a problem, right? If we're not getting there, they're basically putting a blanket over it and trying to deal with it themselves, no? And maybe the project will go through and we'll get there on time, but at what expense? Yeah, because then you have burnout and et cetera, right? So that is something that is very, like, you are not, like, ask for help. Like if there is an issue and you're seeing that issue, don't be a hero. Like the whole hero culture, I feel like it's a terrible thing, right? Both on that side, you end up burning people and so on, but also some people create problems just because they'll be able to to solve them, which is another extreme, no? So asking for help is also a good way of dealing with pressure, and you should stop and say, okay, realistically, can I deal with this? Wouldn't it be easier to? And under that pressure, a lot of the time is very difficult to see how other people could help you. And this happens, it happens to us. Like if we have a lot of stuff to get done, like sometimes I find myself thinking, hey, it will take me less time if I do it myself, even if I have to go to bed, late or whatever, that if I now have to pass this on to someone else who may not have a clear idea of what to do and so on and so forth. But that is an issue, right? Like you should still work on solving those things, right? And I feel, again, things like pair programming or etc. like help a lot in lowering the cost of things like that. No.
So we talked about like the example I gave was on an external deadline. You now mentioned a pressure, Jose. If I understood correctly, it's more like about when you have a lot of things to do as well, and you feel under pressure because you have too much on your plate, right? So then again, the attitude towards that is very different from the one that we mentioned before. It's more about, okay, at some point I need to find a way to because like it's not that. The metaphor of the plate, maybe I'm stretching a bit too much, but you have a lot of things on your plate. It's not that as soon as you eat something, you just it's just the food that is left. No, as soon as you create some space, someone comes in and put another
Yeah,
another
exactly.
spoon of food in your plate, right? They tap that hole that you just ate.
So
Yeah.
on that front, like limiting work in progress is something that personally helps me a lot. Yes, I have a lot of things. I write them down and I choose, okay, which ones are the one that I need to start working on, and I start working on those, and I try to get, I may have a couple at the same time, but don't I try not to take too much. When I start feeling like there's something hanging, you know what I mean, like this feeling of dread, no, that there is something that's I'm not getting to. That's already
Well,
kind of.
this is a really important thing, actually, because our brains, they're not really made to handle too many things at once. I think it's like 5 plus or minus 2 something. It's kind of that kind of number. We can't remember much. uh, but what happens is that, I mean, there's a book called Strategies for Your Brain, and in there they basically talk about, like, it's almost your brain, like, it's the I think the most time energy consuming part is the most advanced part. And they say that it's actually, when it's in when it's working, it takes a lot of energy. And they give the analogy of a theater play, right? There's a stage set, and that stage can get very crowded, and at any time there is a play going on. And if there are multiple voices talking about different things, then it becomes incoherent, and suddenly things stop working the way they should work, right? And so they say, like, think of it as like cleaning up that stage, having only one actor speaking at a time, and not making it overcrowded. And if you have, and they talk about this, if you have too many things in flight, even if you kind of time slicing it, you're moving from one thing to the other, what the lizard brain and like the system 2 is doing is throwing those in kind of thoughts into what you are currently doing. So it stresses you out, like stresses me out, as Sandro knows this, right? When I have too many things to do, is the only thing that really stresses me out. If I have to start finish, start finish, start finish. But if I'm starting something and one thing piles up and I have to go there, and then another thing comes in and I have to go there, I get really, really stressed, because you start losing your way back. You're like, I'm gonna finish this, and then I have to go and finish this, and I have to, and suddenly things become very, very chaotic. And that's when you lose agency. You think, okay, this is overwhelming. I think that's the feeling. You get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that you have to do, because there are too many things that you are doing currently.
Yeah, this is something that I still don't do well, right? So, and this also, certain jobs that we play, they are less favorable for certain things. For example, when I was working full time as a developer, mainly in an agile team, it's much easier to create that sustainable pace, that cadence. And we have tons of methodologies that we use, right? So from Scrum, from Kanban, and like from user stories, from tickets, and all the sort of stuff, and acceptance criteria, and pair programming, and demos, and so you have like a stream, right? It's easy to create a stream because you are always working in that product. You are getting more features done, maybe changing architectures, whatever. As soon as you go for certain positions, mainly management positions, you start, there's no such a thing, like there are not things that you can necessarily, of course there's always things that you can drop, but like it's the nature of that role. You need to deal with a lot of stuff every day, right? So, and one meeting is completely different from the next, because there are loads of people, loads of things that you need to do. And we, at least, well, myself, came to the position that we are now quite quick in a way. Well, the change from a developer to the thing that I do now was fast, let's say.
And we
this
didn't
is
formally
something,
train for what we do now.
no. So I came from a much more structured, right? So way of working, and then quite often that is the self-inflicted pressure that we put, because we also want. It's not that we are only doing a lot of things and we cannot do them, all of them. We also want to do them well, right? This is another problem that I feel that I don't cope well, because yes, I need to deal with a lot of things. The only way to solve that is if I change the work that I do, because the position that we play, or people play in certain, you need to deal with multiple problems at the same time forever. That is your job, right? Juggle multiple balls. Of course, you can delegate and stuff, but even when you delegate, you still need to talk to the people that you are delegating things to, right? So, but then there is the on top of that we want to do things very well, and that goes back to what you're saying, Jose. Sometimes you feel like, you know what, I can do that much faster, better, and stuff than just delegating. And then when you delegate, you well, the person is doing their best, but it's not necessarily how you would have done. So this is an area I think that is difficult. I don't have a proper solution. I don't like to say people, hey, use the task list, use these, or because for me, I still haven't found one that works for me, at least.
What I have to say about that is that it's, again, sorry that I'm bringing it up again, but it is about empathy with yourself. Like, how do you feel if this doesn't get done perfectly, right? Like the way that you think it should be done, or the way that you think if you had time and all, yeah, you could do it, right? And being okay with that, yeah, and not feeling bad about it, or knowing that you can do better next time, right? Like, okay, I'll do it this time, is going to be like this, but this is the first time I'm doing it, I don't have enough time, etc., etc. Let's see if the next time that I have to do it, I will go over it, etc. And it's about empathy, with yourself.
With yourself, yeah, protecting yourself from that.
It's a bit like that. It's a bit
Yeah.
like at some point, like if you're overwhelmed, like this is, and again, I didn't start like this, but I do approach it like this now, right? It's like I have a ton of things to do. Some of these things, I know that I'm not going to be capable of doing it. Like some of these things are going to drop. Okay, which ones? Yeah, this is super important, blah blah. Okay, so I'll prioritize this, can I delegate? Yes, no. And then I rather delegate and not have it done perfectly, or not done at all. Yeah. And this is also where the rationale comes from. Like, okay, we did the best, that the retrospective, what's it called, the prime directive of the retrospective, no? Everyone did the best they could with the information they had and so on. It's a bit like that as well. It's like, hey, I'm trying to do the best I can, and the best I can, it may not be perfect, and that is okay as well. As long as it is, I'm doing the best I can, and it's still not enough. Great. You
Exactly,
will improve.
and
You'll find a better way of doing it next time. You will prioritize better. You will foresee that these things can happen and sort of like mitigate the risk. Like, that's the way that I approach it, at least.
I think it's also part of that is how we see ourselves, right? Part of it, like it's got to boils down to empathy, but it's not just about being kind to yourself. It's actually about the image that we have of ourselves. Like for example, we've come from a very, let's say, development, on the ground background, right? And you start coming into management, and actually we still see ourselves as developers and not managers. And sometimes we think that actually the success criteria of that of our job is that thing gets done well, and often we equate to that us doing that thing well, right? So we kind of, and it's a bit of a hero complex as well. You kind of jump right down into it because you want it done well, right? And then when it's done well, you think, yeah, you know what, yeah, I jumped in, it went all right, and so great. But what you actually often we fail to see is that actually that wasn't our job. Our job was to help people do that job well and not do it ourselves. So we haven't done our job well. We went and did it. The job happened, but that wasn't our job. And so it's also about seeing what your job is. And so when we come to kind of this kind of delegation and those kind of things, is that kind of stop doing what we were doing before when that was our job, and start doing what our job is now, which is to actually enable other people to get to do that. And I think we often, and this is related to pressure, because what happens is we go ahead and we do that, but then we come back and we kind of at the back of our mind know that there's all these things that needed to be done, but they can't be done now because I've spent all my time doing that. And
Yeah.
that then adds to that pressure as well.
No, certainly. No doubt, and of course that is the type of the self-inflicted pressure in there is also because, for example, a lot of people that went to management follow similar trajectory. As soon as they didn't go from a developer to like managing a very large organization, right? So, but you go that progressively. But like one thing that happens when you like this the self-inflicted pressure is because you always want to push yourself, and that is a self-inflicted pressure as well. So then, for example, although I still don't think that I cope well. It's not that I don't cope well. That's not even true. I feel pressured, but like I cope well with that pressure. See what I'm saying? It's not a pressure that I'm bothered, that I'm complaining about. That's what I'm trying to say, because I always push for more. As soon as I get comfort with one level, so I want to do more things now. So I'm not doing enough, and so that is that always like asking for more, getting more and more. But this is not someone that cannot cope with pressure. It's just like they are self-inflicting that pressure to do more and to achieve more, but they accumulate far more as well. And not everyone does well.
In a way, in a way, it is not being able to cope with pressure, to be honest, because it depends on what the end result is. If the end result is burnout, then it is in a way not coping with pressure, because you're giving yourself more and more to do, and you're not creating that space where you can have some rest. And at some point, you burn out, and it's happened to me a few times. In fact, like, it took me a while to kind of, like, at the weekend, for example, sometimes I feel like, you sat there and kind of just relaxing, and you feel guilty. It's like, I could be doing some things, right? But you don't really, because you don't value that, actually this is also important, like resting yourself so you can be more productive later is also important. So that drive, actually, that's the internal drive that can add to the pressures and can lead to burnout, basically.
Mhm. Like I don't want to make too much about us, but it's an interesting topic. For example, I was having this conversation with my wife the other day because she said, "Oh, you're looking tired, and are you enjoying what you're doing and stuff?" And she said, like, if you were working for a different company, if you were an employee somewhere else, I would be asking, like, "Are you sure that you want to do this?" And then I was making a distinction between being tired and being burned out, or also being tired and being unhappy, because there is a huge difference in here,
I think
right?
that's a good topic, and we should probably have a fireside chat on burning out if we haven't had it already.
I
No,
don't think so. I
we
don't
should
think
we should
so.
talk about that, because
It's
I think it also came up in one of the all hands that we had. Someone
Yeah,
asked a
and
question
it's
around that.
related to this as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, but I just, like, okay, I think we can move on. I just wanted you to finish that, because, like, there is a difference, right? So when you are just feeling tired, but you have a sense of accomplishment, and the difference, like, and then like we were discussing, and then she said, well, the difference between you when I met you like 20 years ago and now is not the intensity. Like, you have exactly the same intensity that you had. Now you're just better at coping with a volume of work far larger than you used to cope with, but the intensity of pushing and stuff is exactly the same. So and this is an important distinction, right? Because, like, the burnout, I'm not sure if when you are pushing yourself but you are still enjoying, you might be tired, but I'm not sure if you get to the burnout. I think that is also, again, Jose, I accept that the we can have a separate episode on that, but, like, I think that the burnout might also imply some sort of unhappiness or dissatisfaction. But anyway, we can move on. There are different types of pressure. We spent a lot of time in this kind of pressure, but, like, we can talk about different types of pressure that other
You know,
people can
one
relate to.
one type of pressure that we haven't discussed, at least not to our level, is social pressure. And this is a
Right.
very common thing as well. Like, if other people are doing it, then you may feel pressure to either do it or and so on. And this is quite no, it can happen in a team anywhere, and people sometimes don't realize that if you're part of the majority, that is already kind of adding on to the problem, no, so to speak. And you can see it, you know if we're discussing whether to do X or Y, or the whole having an opinion on things or making a decision is also another of those factors, and people are
Yeah.
not that aware that
Give a few examples, because the social pressure, I'm totally aware of social
let's say
pressure.
that you don't
uh,
agree, let's say that
but
you're with a
within the work environment, let's
within
have
a
a
work
few
environment. Let's say
examples.
that I'm gonna put an example. Yeah, let's say
Working
that you're
late, for
doing work
example.
related. Let's say that you
No,
are talking.
working late, let's say, is an example. People work late. It's
Oh, for
cultural.
for
Everyone works
instance,
late.
oh, right, so that's a good example. I was thinking more on you defending what you think, no,
Right.
and everyone else. Let's say I don't think, uh, you know, let's. I'm gonna take it to a very no. Let's say that we're doing a peer salary review, and I don't think this person is doing a good job. Yeah, and I say it, but there's other five people that are in this meeting, no, and they do think for whatever reason. I'm not gonna like. They may not even know what the person's job is, etc. But they don't agree that that's the situation. You may feel pressured to say, okay, yes, and just release that pressure, right? Like I don't want to go against what
I
everyone
don't want
else
to be
is.
the bad person
I don't
here.
want to, because
Yeah.
then people are gonna think, oh, he's got it in, no, for this person, or they, no, it's not a personal thing. I just don't feel like this is the, no, and I know about this, etc., right? So that's one example. Working late is another example, right?
Like everyone is working late and you're done. You wanna
Yeah,
go home.
Exactly, exactly.
mainly when working in offices, like we would actually go to the physical offices, like the time that you arrive in the morning, who arrives early, who leaves late, and this kind of stuff, right? So you used to see that, right?
Yeah.
You're touching on, again, there's a certain things that you still want to like, y- y- you know, unless that is pre-agreed, you can show up every day at 12. If you have a set of core hours, etc. One thing is flexibility, another is, not being there when you're needed. That's basically, it boils down to that, no?
I
So
think so. That one, there are different strategies for relieving those pressures, right? So the pressure about the example that you gave, Sandro, where, like, for example, it's a lot of the team is staying around. You think, oh, well, it's 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and a lot of people are still sticking around. And like, I'm done. I need to go home. And then you feel the pressure that, well, everyone else is staying. So am I just gonna sit here and browse the internet and go home when they go home? And this I think that one can be relieved by explicit team agreements, right? It's a case of, you talk about the core hours. I need to make this meeting. These are gonna be our core hours. This is what we need to achieve. And often, like, looking at time is a very bad way of judging each other's productivity, right? It's about what you are achieving. And as long as those agreements are in place, it's only when those kind of agreements are not in place, then implicit agreements come into force. And those are like, everyone's around, so I can't leave because we haven't agreed that actually this is what we need to achieve as individuals or team members, right? So that I think that's one hand. On the other hand, where you're sat in a meeting and you're the one that has the opinion that is counter to others. All right. Now, this can be a quite like this could be the root of a lot of dysfunction. If you Why do you have why you feel that the opinion that you have, let's say that your opinion is very well reasoned and is the right opinion, objectively speaking, from our side, but then five other people have a very different opinion. Why is it that as a team those five have such a the wrong opinion, and they have consensus on the wrong opinion? Why is that, right? And right. So this in itself is a great big dysfunction, right? I mean, what's going on? So then you have to go back to, like, where did this political line get drawn, right? And why am I not part of that political spectrum, right? But joking aside, I think there is a bigger problem here. Yeah. So either you have some information that none of those have, and in that case, it's a case of like sharing that information and being reasonable. But even if when you share that information, and let's say that information was very well reasoned and very well presented, and they saw it and they still make the wrong decision, there is a team level dysfunction there, right? Now, from a personal perspective, I don't know how to relieve
Well,
that.
so for me, like, regardless of what kind of pressure, for me the message is very clear, and that's how it. Regardless of what kind of pressure I I perceive to be under, right? So I'm the one that needs to relieve that, right? Because if I don't do something about, I cannot just keep blaming everyone and be unhappy at my desk. Yeah. So in all of those ones that you mentioned, the social one, well, you need to find the courage to expose yourself and say, hey, you know what, like guys, like I know that this is how we work here. I have a few commitments at home, or this is not sustainable for me, right? Whatever that reason might be, you don't need to give details. But what you need to do is to express yourself and say, like, look, what we do here is not working well for me. And you decide how much details you want to give, if any. But then you can say, look, this is not working well for me, but I know that that's how everyone is working. Can we have some agreement? So you can be the instigator of pushing to have that conversation. What you cannot do, well, the worst thing that you can do is, you know what, I don't like this culture. I don't like this social pressure. I don't like these other kind of pressures or how I'm treated and stuff. And then you just take it. And then at some point you say, I'm going to resign and find another job. And that goes back to the conversation that we had in the last fireside chat, because then this person will have, if you act like that, you're going to have exactly the same problem in the next job, right? So you will need to find a way to relieve those pressure, and that will imply you giving your opinion, right? That will imply you giving a solution, making a proposal,
and also
to
listening
change
to others,
things.
and keeping an open
Exactly.
mind, and listening to others, and understanding their reasons, and kind of problem solving together, you know.
Yeah, because not always those 5 people are the ones that are wrong, right? So if you are always in a group where every member of the group is wrong and you are the only one that is right, you need to look inwards, right? Just look inwards.
No, I agree. So, and I was thinking now as we were talking about this, because as consultants, a lot of the time, for instance, you may have to say things that is not what the client wants to hear, or it's not what everyone else is thinking that should be done, and so because it's part of your job. No, at least if you want to do it well, right?
but
You
I
still
think
find
that,
to
sorry Jose, but on that point, I think it's part of your job to say the things that are difficult, but it's also a part of your job to say them in a way that are taken in the nicest possible way that they
exactly.
can, or in most constructive possible way that they can be taken.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna. That's what I was gonna
Sorry.
say now. That you can still say it, no, without being confrontational. Without like there's many ways of saying the same thing. And there's I think this can also segue into another area, which is like you can take a step back and not make it personal. Not like build that kind of wall, so to speak. No, it's not my business, right? Like my job here is to advise. This is, I think, for this and these reasons that we should go in this direction. These are the pros, the cons, whatever, and then the decision needs to be made, but it's not your decision to make. And in understanding that and being okay with that as well, right? And I feel that's also another aspect, like being able to take a step back from work or whatever context is that is kind of like creating all of those inputs to your pressure, or that are creating that pressure, and saying, okay, how much do I want this to affect me, right?
Exactly. Like we always say, like we all need to go home and sleep, right? So because at some point, if you are letting your work to impact you, like when you go to bed, you are the only person that can resolve that, right? Because like you need to draw that line and stuff. And what you said, this is, I think, that I improved massively, right? So though I still go to bed thinking about certain things, but it's not the same thing. Like I'm not like suffering for that. I'm just excited about something. But the you need to be able to draw that line and say, you know what, it's time for me to stop for today, because work is never going to end, right? Work is something that never ends in our area. So it ends when you decide, okay, that's enough for today. And at that point, you need to relax and do other things that you like, right? So this is I got much better.
And this point is actually a very philosophical one, I would say. Is how you decide to react that you can control. At the beginning, we were talking about, some people may have expectations and so on. Like, you can't really go and you can influence them, right? Like, you can explain and all these things, but they are the ones that need to change their expectations. And you're not gonna brainwash them suddenly, and now they think whatever you think they need to think. But you can decide how you want these things to affect you, and you can control that. And this already goes into a more philosophical, Zen, if you wanna go down that road, or the Stoicism and so on, right? So there is this. I don't know if you've seen this video on YouTube of do you have a problem in life? It's a Hindu, one of these, let's say religious speakers or whatever, right? And it's basically like, I have the perfect formula for you. You will not have any problems in your life anymore after you see this graph that I'm going to show you, right? It's like, do you have a problem in life? Yes. Can you do something about it? Yes. Then why worry? No? Do you have a problem in life? Yes. No? Can you do something about it? No. Then why worry? so you will not worry anyway, no? Because if you are, and this is a perspective change, right? It's like, am I taking care of things? Then why am I worried? Am I doing my best? Then why am I worried? If I didn't get there and I still did my best, it was kind of out of my control then, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that I would compliment is that this is very good for the self-inflicted pressure and stuff like that. But then when we were talking about some mainly when we are I think back to the beginning of the conversation, like when we have expectations from others that are not being, that that your best or your work or your skills are not meeting those expectations.
Yeah. And you can lose your job.
Yeah, but a lot of that pressure, and this is, we learned a lot in consultancy, mainly, like when you talk about client happiness and stuff, all of those things is all about expectation, right? So it's doing a very good job so expectations are aligned. And once you align expectations, you reduce failure from the equation, right? So you align a lot of expectations, not only about how it's going to be delivered, but like how we're going to progress towards that. And that if we are going to be able to change course as we progress. So you are aligning all the expectations at all levels. And we are reducing failure, we are reducing pressure, we are reducing surprises. But there is a lot of work that you need to do to establish that relationship, that working ways of working, so that the pressure is alleviated automatically. But like you need to align with other people, because if they are under you, why worry? But if they're above you and if you don't meet their expectations, they're going to fire. Well, I would be a bit worried.
You need to be worried. You're on mute.
But I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, if you're doing the best that you can and they fire you, like, what? If you perform worse, they would have fired you the same. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
it's
the best
not,
you
like,
can
means
that you align the expectations as well, right?
Exactly. Like, if I know there's a problem in aligning expectations and I don't do anything about it,
right?
And I should worry. Then I should worry, right?
Yeah.
But if I know it is there and I'm handling it and so on, like, what? Like, what is it that like the
have I done everything I could
within your control? Is the part that I feel is important there, right? Like, and that really, it's a different.
No, that's a very good point. Yeah, it's like, have I done everything I could in this situation? And then, so okay, so final words, Mesh. Anything from you as final wrap up?
No, I think what the main thing is that it's pressure is an internal thing. Like, there are many sources, both internal and external, and part of it was what Jose was just saying right now as well, right? It's you can do a lot of things about it, and you should have empathy and all these tools that are available to you, and you can use those to alleviate certain things and make keep things visible and fast feedback and get help from others, and all those things will help relieving the pressure. But at the end of the day, it's you have agency, and it's your responsibility to kind of, you know, help at least work as much as you can do. What you can do about it, you should do about it. And what you can't do about it, you should also train your brain so that you are forgiving of yourself as well. That, you know, you kind of go home and sleep as well. That at the end of the day, it is work, right? You get paid to do a job. You're doing your best you can. And when you go home, you know, you do need to create some distance and let rest of your life come in as well.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Jose?
I would invite people to read about the Stoics and Zen and all of that. So for Zen, maybe some of the books by Alan Watts on, you know, like what is Zen and that kind of stuff. And for Stoicism, I recently started reading a book called The Daily Stoic by Ray or Raymond. I don't remember if you look it up, but it's basically each day like a thought, no, and an analysis of that thought. Maybe, you know, it's a Marcus Aurelius quote or something like that, no, taken to the present day, no, and how that can be translated to today. And there's a lot of stuff in there, not only for work but also for your daily life and stuff. And I think it's quite interesting and a good way of, you know, coping with the pressure, not only from work but from life as well. No? So yeah, I invite people to check those out.
Cool. Yeah, and I think that for me, it's just like similar things that you guys already said. Like, I think that if you are feeling under pressure, you need to do something about it yourself, but that will normally means being brave, having the courage, exposing yourself, talking to people. Like, you cannot change the pressure if you don't push yourself out. Like, just waiting for someone to notice and fix that for you, or take the easy route. Oh, just gonna move somewhere else. Not gonna solve it. You're gonna suffer that again in the other place as well, right? So that's just take ownership and try to look inwards, right? So when you feel that everyone is wrong and you are the only one right, and that is a trend.
What is the common factor here? No?
Exactly.
Like
in all those places, everyone is wrong. Every organization is wrong. Every team is wrong. Every man is wrong. Look inwards, right? So cool. Okay, so if you enjoyed this chat, as always, like, subscribe to the channel, thumbs up, leave in the comments what you want us to discuss next, or even any questions that you might have. And yeah, that's it for today.
Well, one thing, Sandra, maybe it's worth mentioning that we may start live streaming this as we record, because we recorded and that's it, right? So maybe now we'll start doing that. So stay tuned. We will probably, you know, put it out on Twitter or whatever if you want to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you would like us to live stream and really want to interact, let us know as well. But because this is what we are considering right now, but it might happen. Cool. Thank you very much. See you next time, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.